Yo, what's going on? It's Max. In a video today to follow up the one that I had posted last Friday about negative player experience in general from the reactions and responses to tunneling slash camping. In general, like play styles that feel kind of cheap and low effort but get results. And usually that trying to just understand like where the collective player mentality is for, are you guys okay with it? Do you find that extremely annoying? And really quick, as a big thank you to everybody who watched the video, dropped a like, left a comment there, and I think it was a really positive interaction I got with a lot of people, some awesome discussion points that I got to talk about and look at. So thank you to everyone who left a comment. I tried to respond to everyone. I still am. Just going over like what your perspective was in mine. And I learned a lot too. I learned that there's definitely some differing perspectives in how people play the game and how they enjoy it. It doesn't have to be this whole like meta versus satisfaction argument that I was kind of talking about before. But now that I've had the weekend to go over it, and in particular, Scott Jun did a like 50-minute live stream of talking about the video, Otstarva's tunneling video, and kind of getting immediate feedback from a chat talking about it. With that, looking online, getting some of the comments from you guys, there's a couple other things that I'd noticed, or at least wanted to kind of refine from the initial statement that I think is important. And maybe it's not. I mean, I think it's pretty important in my eyes. So the first thing was the fact that people's player perspective changes. And one thing that Scott noticed is people who are more experienced or play the game more are the ones who disconnect slash quit. I cannot say, confirm, nor deny from my experience, but apparently that's just something that he's noticed, and he's played the game a lot more, so I would take that as a genuine consideration for what he said. But I don't think that in general a lot of people disagree with the definition of tunneling or what that gameplay, like bad cheap gameplay, looks like. I think everyone collectively in my comments from the video said, I think there's reason to call that tunneling. It was 3 hooks, 3 downs. Usually you would let people go, but also some people feel as though they're getting pressured from gens getting done, and they feel the way that they need to win the game is to get someone out of the game. It was a pretty homogenized response, actually, that like a lot of people felt, no, if I'm winning the game, like I'll let these guys go. I want to play a full game of DBD, but when gens start getting done in front of me, like, I'm gonna make sure that I can try to win my game back. I'm not just gonna let them run over me. And that kind of applies from both sides, survivor and killer. Like, killers don't want to get gen rushed, survivors don't want to get tunneled. But at the same time, it's a pretty collective understanding of what would be a negative player experience. Like, no one denies tunneling feels bad, camping feels bad, and that's really good. I think there's a very positive fact that we're all kind of in agreement there. Additionally, a thing that I had heard or noticed was Scott was saying that, and people were talking about it too, tunneling slash camping with, like, in particular with like Bubba, Trickster, Huntress, people that can get health states and downs really quickly. Those strategies that are generally considered like cheaper, don't demonstrate as much skill. And someone in my comments had kind of said the same thing too. It's bad gameplay because and I'm kind of extrapolating the bad gameplay into it doesn't demonstrate as much skill when playing it. Still generate good results. And I personally, I'll ask you guys, do you think that's a good or bad thing that something like tunneling is able to be just as effective as splitting hooks, applying map pressure, and general macro concepts that are better? Is that something that is healthy for the game, knowing that it's promoting a negative player experience to receive. I don't think anyone's upset from gen pressure and map control. For slowdown perks, people get upset with, but that's kind of the meta. But like with, I guess in particular with tunneling camping, like they're strategies that require low effort from the killer and they get good results. And that logic makes a lot of sense to me for why people do it. And admittedly, I'm kind of the same way. I'm not a good killer by any means. I have like approaching 500 hours in the game, and a majority of that is on Survivor. So like, I'm not a good killer player. You could see in this game, I'm losing chases pretty often. I'm wasting a lot of time on these little structures here. I lose track of where people are pretty quickly. But I don't think I'm bad at the game. I'm not good, but I'm not bad. I'd honestly say I'm overwhelmingly average at the game. And because of that, I realized that, at least for me personally, something like choosing to tunnel someone out of the game, it makes it a lot easier for me. I am running, in this case, a little bit of a sweatier build, but in times before, like if I wanted to win doing some of these harder archive challenges and stuff, I might consider trying to tunnel camp someone out if I need to get like 4 sacrifices using something like Territorial Imperative. And in my opinion, a garbage perk. I hope no one disagrees with me. And if that's a hot take, I was not meant for this community. I'm sorry. But that was just something that I had noticed. Like the bad gameplay, even though some people didn't really flush it out, I think that kind of is in tangent with a low demonstration of skill, because you're not splitting up pressure around the map or showing off general macro concepts. And that logic I can agree to. I can fully understand that. To talk about how to fix, quote unquote, fix tunneling camping. Player sentiment, in my experience, with the people I had talked to in my comments, kind of just said, if it's possible to do in the game, it's gonna happen. And I can kind of agree with that. I mean, if you want to face camp with Bubba in the basement, as in like with Insidious, you can't do a whole lot. You know, you're stuck with the fact that he's gonna sit in front of you, and you're gonna have this god coordination to get them out. But are there ways to disincentivize that or reward other playstyles? And that's kind of more where my solution was going, without changing the balance of the game, because changing the balance of the game not only requires thinking, which I can't do sometimes, but also generally causes some controversy. And Ots talks about that in his tunneling video, where if you were to make some kind of like base kit Thanatophobia, for example, not only does that make like Nurse and Blight more oppressive, like some of the best killers in the game now get free pressure, but it also feels bad from like a survivor perspective. For example, I'm doing my gen slower now because my teammates are bad. And I mean, that's how Thanatophobia kind of is already. But now when that's like a base kit mechanic of the game, that doesn't feel good. And there's very similar things to what happens with, I apologize. There's very similar arguments to be said for the other side too. So the thing that I would consider looking at is something like blood point incentive. For me personally, I have no issue with blood points being given to reward beneficial playstyle, in the sense that the base kit blood point incentive of barbecue and chili could be implemented, and that would positively affect the mentality and decision making for some players. Definitely not all. I know there's people that want to win. They're going to win. They don't care about the blood points. For me, at least when I was trying to grind out my teachables, my items and perks on and add-ons for killer and survivor, I cared about blood points. I would go out of my way running barbecue and chili to get 4 stacks. I run my blood point offering, and all of that's done before I'm trying to kill anyone out of the game. But that's because me personally, I had value in those blood points. If you've played the game enough, I mean, there's a lot of people I know who, or I've seen gameplay of, I wouldn't say I know, but that I've seen gameplay of, that are sitting on a high amount of blood points because they don't want to spend them. They just straight up are, it takes too long to spend them. They're not really getting anything. They would just be prestiging characters, and they don't have value. With the reported year 7 changes for the blood web spending, the blood point changes as a whole, I think there is a very real consideration for blood point incentives to change how people play. Definitely not everybody. It would be, I'd say, a minority of people. I, for one, like blood point incentives. They give me reasons to play differently and try out new things, but that wouldn't necessarily be applicable to everyone. And I understand that's not how everyone does play, but for the sake of not changing the balance of the game and rewarding a healthier play style, I don't think anyone would really have an issue with that, unless there's a couple people that are like, oh, well, now Survivor's harder to get blood points on without, our incentive. And that's a whole other argument, but like, my point being, I think the blood point incentive is a pretty friendly, like, group hug approach. Everyone's gonna have a good time, has a good opinion of that as a proposed balance change. So that was kind of my idea with the whole base kit barbecue chili blood point thing. But that might not be super effective, and I understand that. The other change that I didn't talk about, Scott talked about in his live stream recording, and Otz didn't mention, which I love Otstarva. I'm not even going to say he's a good or bad person. Like, phenomenal content creator, amazing personality, very good player too. In talking about why tunneling was more necessary, or how it became kind of more viable, he didn't talk about the nerf to decisive strike, which I think was one of the biggest components that disincentivized tunneling in the past. Generally speaking, in my opinion, I think this is true. I could be very wrong, but some of the strongest perks in the game don't even have to be in play. It's just because they existed, it made people fundamentally play different. What I mean by that, and I think everyone can understand, you have to wait a couple seconds to swing in case someone has Dead Hard. If Dead Hard never existed, chases could have ended a few seconds sooner. Slugging is a pretty good strategy to make sure you can get people down with pressure. The fact that Unbreakable exists means slugging has a detrimental, downside, and that's a very good perk. I think people still run Unbreakable from time to time. And then there's like the second chance perks and stuff, which I'm not going to get into, but there are some base kit powerful perks that I feel as though dictate the way that people play the game. And Decisive Strike was one of the biggest, in my opinion, and I've only played for the last like 2 years, so I wasn't even back when DS was like super broken and conspicuous actions didn't stop it. A lot of people ran Decisive Strike, and at least when I played Killer back then, Decisive Strike was the single reason why I personally would never try to hook someone twice. It was a big waste of time to get stunned for the longer, was it 5 seconds? I forget how long old DS was. It was an absolute nightmare to get hit by that long of a stun. You lose a lot of chase pressure, and so much time is bought from a single instance of DS. Now, with the fact that the timer went down to like, I don't know how long it is now, but I know that the duration of the distance you can get is the only part that's actually decreased, because the first couple seconds of the DS stun animation are changed from the survivor getting off the shoulder. That's always the same. The extra time was just how far they can hold W to the next tile, to the next building, whatever it may be. And I don't see DS anymore. I've seen it a couple times. Like, I can genuinely remember pretty clearly the couple times I got hit with a DS in the last month of playing the game, or I've seen DS in the month of playing the game. And Decisive Strike, in my opinion, was a very good perk because tunneling was a good strategy. It was an effective strategy. I shouldn't say good, I should say effective. And so, like, with the nerf to Decisive Strike, because it was a frustrating experience for Killer, then now one of the biggest ways that would stop people from tunneling is no longer in play. And now it's like, okay, why would I not be interested in tunneling people when there's not much that's going to stop them from, getting hit again? And of course, there's the supplemental thing, like Off the Record kind of replaced Decisive Strike in the, free endurance for a very long duration until you get hit or make a conspicuous action. So I guess it's kind of similar. And I guess in that argument, like, yeah, sure, just replace off the record with decisive strike, and you have a very, very similar situation. But I felt like that was also something kind of important, because I don't see off the record that much. I know it's probably one of the best perks in the game for Survivor, but I don't see it. I probably because I'm not going against, you know, the top of the top MMR, and I'm happy with that. Like, I probably wouldn't want to see 4 off the records, 4 adrenalines, and exhaustion perk plus, you know, prove thyself, reassurance, what have you. Even hyper focus too, but hyper focus is actually a little bit of a skill demonstration, so that's a whole other thing. But generally, what I was getting at is, like, the best perks in the game generally, or I should say, some of the best perks in the game generally alter the playstyle of characters or of people just because of their existence. And I think Decisive Strike was absolutely one of those. Off the record, I don't know as much about. I haven't gotten hit by many, but I know it's a very good perk. And I just wanted to know if you guys kind of felt that same way, that like, oh, maybe, or like, I guess actually, what's your opinion on the fact that Decisive Strike is kind of a big component of why people aren't getting tunneled anymore, because that the perk is just so much weaker. Hey, really quick, this is Max in the post edit going through the video, and I realized that I'm kind of an idiot. I totally meant, what do you guys think about the fact that Decisive Strike is now weaker and incentivizes tunneling more? I don't know how in my brain I literally got that as an opposite, but my fault. I just don't want to have that and be super confused. Anyways, back to the rest of the video. Also, and I mean, this is a very bold statement to make, and I don't think, without giving it some more thought, I don't think it's healthy, but the way that they made a weaker base kit Borrowed Time, can they make a weaker base kit Decisive Strike? That combined with Borrowed Time probably is a lot, and I think that's definitely an extreme, but having some of those core base changes to address those issues could be a way to stop that gameplay. And while I haven't thought of the logistics of it, and I'm very sure that logistics wasn't the right word, while I haven't thought of how the implementation would really be, and knowing that a base kit decisive or something like that would be pretty strongly looked at, possibly down upon, because even like the base kit BT, some people were up in flames, like, wow, that's a really bold thing to say. Also, ignore the fact that I ran right past a hook. But yeah, just things like that. It makes me wonder how we could balance the game in favor of things like that. Let me know what you guys think. Once again, big thank you for all the support in the last video. I think it's one of the best videos that's ever been on my channel. A lot of good interactions with people. I was really happy to have those conversations. And that's about it. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your week.